We had a regional workforce development workshop before this meeting started, and Hope gave an amazing overview of the economic development analysis and the labor analysis that they're doing at Idaho National Laboratory to really forecast and work towards those workforce needs. And it's really impressive, the work that you have going on. So I'm looking forward to hear what you guys have to talk about today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Laura. And lucky for everyone here, I didn't even bring my slide deck, so next time. Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you still here. I'll repeat what many of my colleagues have said. Thank you for making it to Idaho Falls. I don't think I've lived here for 6 years, on and off. I don't think I've seen the downtown quite that busy in a minute. So thank you for going to our restaurants and our bars and pushing some life into the downtown, additional to the growth that we've seen recently. So we're going to talk a lot about workforce this morning. I have an incredible panel with me, and so we're going to talk all about the workforce. I don't think we need to talk necessarily on a high level. We know that the nuclear industry is going to demand all kinds of workforce, right? From engineers, scientists, tradespeople, welders, you name it. But I really want to get into the details about what we need from the labor side, where education is, and then some thoughts from the industry side of things. So I'm going to kick it off with my panelists. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, spend a couple minutes talking about their perspectives, and then we'll jump into some conversation. So, Mary Lou?
All right. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I repeat my welcome. Glad that you're here. My name's Mary Lou Dunzett-Gauger. I'm a professor of nuclear engineering at Idaho State University. I also run our little reactor at the university, and I'm licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as a senior reactor operator. So I wear some interesting hats. I'm past president of the American Nuclear Society. Now at ISU, we have very traditional education, for engineers, scientists, bachelor's, master's, PhD. We also have a college of technology where the trades are very well addressed. Through the American Nuclear Society, in which I have been very active for many years, we have developed a Nuclear 101 course that's directed specifically at professionals who are transitioning into the nuclear world or maybe just want to learn more about nuclear because they're in it but don't speak the language, so to speak. I could use my teacher voice. Got it. Okay. The American Nuclear Society also has developed a certified nuclear professional credential, which is going to be debuting this year. We've been creating other micro-credentials in areas like licensing and regulation, rad waste, nuclear economics. For the state of Wyoming, last academic year, I created and taught a course of what's nuclear for any undergraduate student from any discipline. It's an 8-hour drive from here to Laramie. I know it very well because that's where the University of Wyoming is. But I taught that course. We had a couple of English students in the course. So I'm all over the map in my introductory statements. The point I'm trying to make is that we need all types of education and training. It's got to be all over the map because we have to train people from all over the map and grow that workforce.
Thank you, Mary. Good morning, everybody. Colin Jones. I'm with Amentum, working for our Energy and Environment group here in North America. First of all, it's great to see so many familiar faces in the audience. I'd like to thank Mayor Casper for her leadership in this area and hosting us here this week, and then congratulations to Seth and the ECA team for pulling off another well-attended and very thoughtful program the last 2 days. Just by means of an introduction, for those of you that may not know much about Amentum, I'll start off here locally in Idaho Falls. We are part of each of the major contracts here, the Idaho Cleanup Project. We're part of the INL mission, the Battelle Energy Alliance, and we're working with the naval reactors in actually building them a new spent fuel pool for their use out there on the desert. as a whole, for Amentum, we have a nuclear workforce of 9,000 that span across the globe. And as we get through today and answering some of Hope's really tough, hard questions, I'm going to be able to talk about what we've experienced from a workforce perspective here in the U.S., predominantly working in the Department of Energy space at sites like Paducah, Hanford, Savannah River, and obviously here in Idaho. But then talk a little bit more of our experience abroad in supporting new nuclear development. Over in the UK and in Europe, we're involved in many of the nuclear new build programs and actually seen as the go-to company to help countries in developing their nuclear new build programs, as we've been recently hired by the Czech Republic, Holland, and other countries like that to help them develop their nuclear new build program. So more to look forward to that as we go through the discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. My name is Dan Glynn. I'm the United Association Training Director for Local 598 based in Pasco, Washington in the Tri-Cities area. I want to say thank you for the invite from Laura and Seth to come and speak with you. When last year you came and visited, many of you came and visited my home area of Tri-Cities, and some of you hopefully were able to make it to our training facility and be able to take on a tour. I'm sure I toured some of you, and I apologize, although he sees familiar faces, I forgot them already. So anyways, good to see you again if I saw you last time. But hopefully, when you went through that training facility, you saw that we are invested in the community. That's what we do. Our community is more than obviously just the nuclear community, but because of our locale and where we're at, it's a hub of it. If you look at every logo of Local 598, it's an atomic symbol. That's because that's our basis. We were founded 80 years ago during the Manhattan Project, so it's in our roots. Also myself, it's in mine. That's when I say that we are part of the community. As just a history of myself, my grandfather moved up from Oklahoma for DuPont in 1943. Not only was he working there on that site, but when I say that he's part of the community, he also sat on the city council when they reincorporated in 1958, so his name is on the charter when they reincorporated in 1958. So the main thing I wanted to touch on here is not necessarily that it's union labor, that it's the training facility. Of course, I want to talk to all those things. But the one thing is we are already a community that lives in these places. So I know we've had a lot of discussion about how do you engage, how do you do that? Well, in many times, facilities like mine, groups like mine, are a shortcut to more than just the workforce, but are actually a shortcut to the entire community because we've been there and we've been in all facets of it. So thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan, Colin, and Mary Lou for joining us this morning. As Laura mentioned, I'm Hope Morrow, the Manager of Workforce and Economic Development Programs at Idaho National Laboratory, also a co-chair of the Idaho Advanced Energy Consortium, who you've heard from a bit this week as well. My background is actually in labor economics, so I want to start off on a question. We are currently experiencing this pressure between the labor market and the fact that we're talking about an innovative technology. SMRs and microreactors are really pushing the boundary on technology deployment and how we look at those technologies. So I would like some input from the panel on, do we think those innovative technologies require us to change how we do workforce development? And if so, how would we do that?
All right, I'll go first. So upon thinking about this question, I realized we don't really need new skills and talent. We just need to be able to apply them in different ways. Schools are really responsible for providing the fundamentals, and then it's incumbent on the people going into the trade to learn the trade or the profession, to learn the specifics. On the professional side, for design, you need an ability to conduct alternatives assessments for efficiency, for licensing aspects, including for civil construction. It's not all about the reactor. You need to be ready to challenge regulations across the board. You have to be aware of new materials and, in some cases, insufficient data in codes and standards. But if we break down workforce or demographically, the professionals are of a smaller number. Probably unique to these new reactor designs will be material science challenges and chemistry challenges because the designs are so different than our light water reactor fleet. But the majority of the workforce is going to be tradespeople, including health physics technicians for construction, for maintenance, for operation. They really will be the dominant workforce.
Yeah, to follow on from what Mary Lou just said, I think overall from a nuclear industry perspective, it is a very mature industry, right? As we know here with the labs, INL's history alone in nuclear dating back into the early 1950s. So I think, from my perspective, and I'll talk here domestically in the US, is, there's been a lot of talk, and Hope mentioned it as part of, or Laura mentioned it as part of her introduction to this panel, about the kind of silver tsunami we've been talking about in this industry. We've been talking about it for a long time. We talked about it for so long that I actually didn't think it was ever going to materialize, but it did. And the driving force, from my perspective at least, was COVID. We saw a lot of change on our sites around the DOE complex after COVID. People simply took that opportunity to retire. They didn't want to come back in the office. So we've gone through in the last few years in having to recruit and train up to a third or more of a workforce at many of our DOE sites. And we've actually done it, and we've done it very successfully. Safety obviously being the number one priority, working with our partners in the unions, which we cannot do anything at any of our DOE sites without the union representatives. So I'm so glad to see Dan here and part of this panel and part of this discussion. So I think here, from a US perspective, I think we've demonstrated, not just Amentum, but other contractors in the complex, that we have the ability to bring in new workforce, to be able to train them safely, and to be able to go and execute their missions. And again, even in the DOE space, we have some high-tech, complicated facilities that we've designed, built, commissioned, and now operating successfully. So again, I think as an industry, we have a lot of experience in it. And working with our academic institutions, working with our unions, working with industry, collectively with whether it's a DOE partner or whether it's with a commercial vendor, we have the ability to bring the workforce in that we need.
Yeah, certainly from my perspective, one of the things that this raises when we talk about new things, I belong to an old organization, right? So when I look at where we are, Sean mentioned seeing things in past, present, and future. Well, being a member of an organization that goes back 130 years, being part of a local that goes back 80 years, when we look at training, we've been doing training for a long, long time in lots of industries, but certainly at where I'm at, we've been in the DOE complex in general, nuclear specifically, and working in those places. The evolution of the training is probably more as opposed to the new, right? Instead, when we talk about is there a need for new, certainly there will be some in some cases, but I think, like Mary Lou mentioned, there's bases, there's foundational things that haven't really changed, and as those new things come up, we can modify, evolve. Because we have a long-standing tradition in it, I have the benefit of tribal knowledge, right? And you don't want to lose that. So, for instance, right now, Columbia Generating Station is in the refueling outage, right? So I'm here, my phone rings every once in a while because I have an apprentice that's trying to figure out something about getting onboarded or something like that. We're getting them going. But it's interesting, I have 19-year-old pipe welders that are out there right now for their first outage, getting into the nuclear industry. Before I left on Monday, a gentleman came by. I didn't recognize him, and I went up and talked to him. And I met him. His name was Carl Pettyjohn. He'd retired 26 years ago. And he told me that when they set the reactor for number 2, he and his partner, brother-in-law, two of them welding on one piece of pipe, the first weld off the reactor. And we sat, and I got to share those stories with him. Well, those are the things that happen when we talk about the training for new. It was always new once, right? And then it becomes a part of it. And we have a history room. You can go through and see our old new technologies. So we're trying to be in a position where we're in the conversation to make sure we evolve, but not have to reinvent.
Yeah, I love the concept of training and education evolution, right? We don't just start from scratch, but we do need to grow and change and think about that evolution as the industry grows and changes. I can't talk about evolution and change without talking about timing. I think this is going to be one of our biggest hurdles in the nuclear industry, is thinking about timing, in particular in the workforce. Colin, I want to touch back on the Hinkley project a little bit. We're talking about mass amounts of workforce, right? And so you send a whole lot of people or grow a whole lot of people in an area to converge on one major project. And how are we thoughtful about how to make sure that we keep that workforce in the nuclear industry or adjacent to it? And how can we support our community leaders? What advice do we have for our community leaders to manage that timing, when training shouldn't start, so we aren't too early or too late?
Yeah. Obviously, timing is everything, right? And it's been impressive. The last 48 hours has been a lot of discussion and a lot of opportunities coming up with many of the vendors that have presented here in the last 24, 48 hours. So at Amentum, as I mentioned as part of my opening, we are involved in many of the new nuclear build programs in the UK and in Europe. On the previous panel, there was a speaker that mentioned Hinkley Point. We're part of the Hinkley Point program in building two of the French-designed 1,000-megawatt reactors there. That has a site construction workforce of 14,000 people, right? 14,000 people don't just show up overnight. And I have a colleague of mine in the audience, Adrian Worker from the UK, is here, and he reminded me as I came up to the stage today, as companies like Amentum, we're fairly sophisticated in our planning and our capability planning. And so we have the ability to be able to foresee a project start. What are the requirements for the workforce, and how can we develop that workforce? Whether that's a local workforce or whether that's a workforce from other parts of the country, or again, as you look at this, and especially from a supply chain, this becomes a global potential solutions that you bring in potential supply chain and workers from all over the world to help support. But in addition to workforce, though, and as we talked about in our previous comments, training requirements. So we start, construction of a nuclear facility. In 5 years, you're going to need operators. So when do you start training those operators to be able to so that they're ready for to start commissioning and then operation of a facility? And then obviously from a supply chain perspective, and workforce and supply chain go a lot hand in hand, right? As you want your vessels, your NQA1 qualified vessels to show up on time, so that the workforce who are building the civil construction around the plant know, the timing of when they need to be finished in whatever construction activities those have. But companies like us at Amentum, we have the ability to be able to plan all those things out. The other plug I'd like to put in is, again, more focused from a US and the DOE perspective. So, and again, this Idaho is a good example of where we have a workforce on the cleanup side of about 2,000 people. And they're doing waste management, decommissioning activities, operating high-hazard nuclear facilities. They're working their way out of a job. But the beauty of a site like the Idaho National Lab is you have the lab with an ongoing mission that's going to be building 10, 15, 20 reactors here hopefully in the next few years and decades beyond. We work very closely, as you know, Hope, and with BEA and others, in being able to look at opportunities for our cleanup workforce to transition over into nuclear new build. And they're trained nuclear workers, and they're very, very eager to be able to support and looking at new missions. So I think there's a number of things. There's obviously the tools we have in the toolkit to be able to do capacity planning and making sure we have the right people in the right place at the right time. But then there's using and utilizing our existing workforce to be able to go and support new and future missions.
Please.
I was thinking about guidance that I would suggest for a community, and the first thing in my mind was tie into a company like Amentum that has that capability to do that prediction, and then base your actions on that. Wyoming is a great example of this sort of implementation. they've been working for years, getting ready to deploy plant, but even if they don't ever get the plant, they're growing their own, they're building workers, they're building knowledge, and maybe if the reactor never happens in Wyoming, they'll still have a group of people that are uniquely qualified that could perhaps work at other locations.
That's a really good point. Is one of the things that we're able to do is in some countries where we work, they want certain infrastructure in country. They don't want everything to come out of country. And as we think about this and what the local communities care about is, okay, I'm going to build a reactor in my state, but I want the workforce to come from my state. I want the economic generation. So I want the supply chain infrastructure to be built in my state so that I can get the economic benefits of that. It's not just about building the nuclear plant. It's also all those follow-on items. And again, is we can help in conversations with local communities and from a planning perspective and working with the vendors and working with the estates to be able to line those things out so that it fits for everybody.
Like both of them are mentioning about that obviously it's a matter of being prepared for these things. The agility comes from that preparation to respond. But you can only prepare if the workforce is there, interested, already in process. And so certainly from our community, we have the DOE complex, Hanford. There is many things that can keep people moving and keep them in that realm so that they're ready. I really appreciate Colin saying that they're very sophisticated and can name the date that they're going to need the workforce. I don't deal with a lot of contractors that are like that, but I appreciate that. But what I mean by that is we can work at those dates. We can work to prepare for those things, but what we can't do is we can't bring on 1,000 new people and have 1,000 brand new people to train. And so having those resources available in your community that can be leveraged where you're pulling that in from the community and they're already working is a huge asset, and it's one to think about that, hey, if we come in there, what other things can we get started where we can engage the community and start to get that workforce developed before we need them for this, but we can probably invest. We know we're going to need this done, so let's work towards this and start building that group.
Yeah. So I think that our industry partners are getting more and more mature in this space, right? We recognize as industry partners, we have to give our education and training partners as much information as possible so they can plan. My question, Mary Lou and Dan, are our education and training institutions matured to the point where they can be that flexible and have that agility at this point? Or is now the right time to be kind of adjusting how those systems work so that when we do have to deploy, not necessarily recruiting 1,000 people out of nowhere, Dan, I hear you on the people part, but when we suddenly need to start up some of these programs, are we in a place where we can be that flexible that quickly, or do we have some homework to do?
Educational institutions are not flexible. They just aren't. It takes a long time for things to move. Big administrative push. Having said that, as I mentioned earlier, it's really not the fundamentals that are taught K-12 and in college that have to change, because the fundamentals are the same. It's how they're going to get applied. And so in regard to that, that's where we come in with certificates and micro-credentials, and those things can be very quickly put together, and we have, through American Nuclear Society, as I mentioned, done a lot of that. So I think the overall answer to your question is yes, we have that flexibility. We recognize the need, and we just need to make sure that our educational institutions continue to focus on the fundamentals and the use of them creatively.
I get to be on the other side of that coin. We're very flexible, right? Because we specifically, and I say we, I mean any of the trade schools, the union trade schools, we have a responsibility not just to teach to a completion of a knowledge of some kind, to gather this certification or a degree, because our goal in training is jobs, paychecks, right? And so when we're engaged by many of you, when you come in and you start doing site surveys and hopefully you go to engage in your local trade schools, then that's when we start to say, well, what is the need going to be? What's that change that's going to be needed? If I had a new job that was going to pop up in 6 months that was going to have let's just say a very strange alloy weld process that is very unique and is not done in many places, in a matter of probably a month, I would have a curriculum built for it. I would have the training for it. I would bring in somebody, and I would start training the many welders that I already have in that new process. Because I have a responsibility not to the attaining that knowledge and being able to show it to somebody else. It's a matter of, can we go and actually do those jobs? Because that's literally what we're tasked with.
And I'd like to add on there. I mean, there is a contractor responsibility in this too, and often cases with these projects, you have defined endpoints, you have deliverables, and so we have schedules that we got to meet, and we have to put resource-loaded schedules together. So, and again, give kudos to my local team here. We work very closely with the College of Eastern Idaho in looking at helping develop the workforce that we need. We currently, and again, it's not just, some of it's not those specific welding or technical skills, but we currently have a program right now with CEI on project controls, right? And anybody who works in this industry knows you need an army of project controls people, bean counters, who are making sure we stay on schedule and we stay on cost. Well, so your typical business programs, they don't educate for project controls. And so we developed a program with CEI where we've got folks in there that are learning how to be project controls people, which is only going to benefit and enable us in being able to deliver our mission out at the INL.
Thanks, everyone. And I appreciate that Colin, President Barber, would have my head if I didn't take the opportunity to say that the College of Eastern Idaho in particular, I would like to say community colleges are a critical component of this entire workforce training system. One note I would like to make is that each style of training and education has a role here, especially in nuclear. And so if I had a piece of advice for communities, it would be whomever those leaders are, whether it's industry, local elected leadership, economic developers, education partners, et cetera, making sure that the training teams, the community colleges, and the universities are all working together, whether that's through a consortia or they're doing it on their own, in a very intentional way will make or break the entire system. These institutions are flexible in different capacities, and so using each one the way that they're meant to be used and the way that they're built will make or break the workforce development opportunities for your community and for the industry as a whole. So we talked a little bit about responsibility, so let's talk about that. And I'm gonna challenge each one of you not to say everyone's responsibility. So I'm just gonna start with that. So where does the responsibility lie for workforce development? Individuals, employers, government entities, educational partners all have reasons to invest in the talent pipeline. Who pays for these programs? Is it different in different places? Is our industry different? And how should we think about that?
I'll answer first because mine's really simple. I do. We contractually do, right? And I mean that in the sense of coming from a union organization, right? My local, whether it be that or the overall United Association or any of your trade unions, the actual contract is to provide the workforce. Okay. Now that doesn't mean everyone's not the hook, like our contractors or our local, state, national governments that need to be in front of that to make sure that we can do those things and that we can be on time with those things. But the reality is we are, and when it comes to the like I said, the easy part to talk about is who pays for it. I can tell you who pays for it. We pay for it. As a member, we give back a portion of that for our training. So right now, every member at United Association 598, when they go to work, $2.41 goes back into my training budget to train the 1,500 members that we have. The 225 apprentices that I have, which will probably double in 3 years. Great, but nonetheless, we do that because it's reinvesting in ourselves. We certainly reach out for partners in those things, but as a workforce, we are reinvesting in ourselves to make sure that we're prepared for any of the upcoming challenges and jobs.
Just one tack on, Dan. Do you think that's sufficient? Do you think you'll need other resources outside of that?
Always. Yes, thank you. We do resource other things. We resource when there's opportunities, certainly through our government opportunities, things like grants and things like that, or contractor opportunities, suppliers that provide grants like that. Because when, as we've mentioned before, when there's a new need, we can respond pretty quickly to that. And we will be self-invested in the sense of that we want to get that done, but if we can have partners that will come in and say, if we help you get this done, so that we get, you know, a mutual goal, then we always are trying to look for those opportunities because just as an example, I have roughly like 78 curriculums that we teach over 5 years in 4 trades. But if there's something new comes up that we have a new opportunity and a new contractor or partner says, we really need to get this done and we'll help you get there, then I'd have 78. I'd make a new one. I'd make a new one. But sometimes we do need that help to get to where they actually want us to be.
I think, you know, as I just mentioned in my last set of remarks, I think we have a big the contractor community has a big responsibility here. You know, we have contracts to go deliver, whether it's a nuclear facility or anything else for that matter. If we cannot show up with a workforce, we're not going to get a second contract, right? And again, it's a team sport though. While we take the responsibility, we have to work with our union brothers and sisters in recognizing the work that they do. And then as we mentioned before, in the local communities where we work, you know, as I mentioned, you know, we've got 2,000 people here on the cleanup contract. We've got about 6,000 people here working at BEA. And then, you know, a couple of hundred more were out at Naval Reactors. Most of the people who work here come from this local community. And so that's, as employers, we are responsible for providing those opportunities and providing the training so people can go be safe and productive in executing their work. But again, I think it is a team effort though, but we do as contractors take that responsibility very seriously.
I'm going to twist the question a little bit.
Sure.
I'm not so sure the right word is responsibility. This is a business, right? It's supply and demand. So when there's a need for 60 people with a certain skill set, well, if a company needs them, there's a demand for them, and then they have to figure out how that's going to work. So it is a business, and I think that we just need to let it operate that way. I get concerned when there's talk about, oh, well, government should come in and do this and that. Well, we know how that works out. It doesn't. So let the business people do what they're good at, getting their employees they need with the training they need.
I agree to a certain extent. I would also say that some of the work that the government does to develop our workforce is absolutely critical. I think the launch program is a great example in the state of Idaho of making sure that we are seeing students go on and reducing those barriers. And so I think what the government can do, state and federal government, even local in some respect, matters to increase the enticability of certain industries in particular and help entice students into some of these programs. So I'll change, or maybe I won't take my own advice. What I would say to the community leaders is it is everyone's responsibility. So when you're talking about building these ecosystems and you have a contractor that says, well, that's the government's responsibility or the education partner's responsibility, I would ask that you push back on them and say, also yours, and vice versa. Every single one of these parties needs to play together in this space. It is a business. It is also a community. We are in a society together trying to build an industry. And so as much of that kind of cohesive collective building as we can do, I think the better off that we'll all be.
Just add on there, again, from a DOE perspective, in each of our DOE contracts, there is a requirement from the government for a community commitment plan. And so, and as part of those community commitment plan, education features very heavily, starting at kindergarten level. So here at Idaho and across all of our sites, we have STEM programs focused on all levels of schooling to be able to bring in that next generation of workforce. So there is, as well as government is involved in that because that's part of the direction. If we didn't include a community commitment plan in our proposals, we're not going to win contracts. So and again, it all goes down to that relationship. Everybody's talking to each other, focused on what is needed and when it is needed. You just got to be able to continue that dialogue with many different stakeholders.
Yeah.
just real quick, I just, thinking about this cooperation in that community when we're really talking about workforce development, that group, the economy of people, right? And the responsibility, aside from, I know you asked who pays for it, and I mentioned who paid, dollars and cents, I know who pays for it, but also in that responsibility of working with the next person on that chain of workforce development. So, for instance, I work closely with my local trade schools and colleges because they're going through and they're getting a certificate, they're getting a qualification that then I can hone in on a specific that can get them to where they need to go. But then I also am going to then work with our contractors and our industry partners to help that person find a place, find a home, find somewhere to go. So that conversation constantly about workforce development has to happen. If you're not having those communications, then it does just get to, well, they said they would bring me somebody and they didn't, or, well, they never told me they needed anybody until yesterday. Yeah. And so that's part of that responsibility more than the monetary part of it.
Certainly.
I'd like to comment that I think we're in violent agreement here. Yeah. Because while I said it's a business decision, it's supply and demand, the place where government can and should be focused, if they're involved at all, is K-12 and the universities. Again, shoring up the basics and STEM for the students that can get into the working world.
Yeah. And the community colleges, right, Marley?
Yes, community colleges.
I think we only have a couple minutes left. Does anyone in the audience have a question for our panel? Please.
Check and see, does our K-12 include accurate and appropriate information about nuclear technology or even energy careers? And then extending from that, the many different energy careers that are available. It's not just engineering, it's not just the trades.
Yeah, in a previous life, I was a high school science teacher before I went to grad school and became a nuclear engineer. So I feel passionately, I call myself a passionate and a chronic educator. I just can't stop. And I still feel very, very strongly about K-12. It's very, very important. The answer to your question is that there are some very valuable materials out there. I would send you first to the American Nuclear Society, where, and yes, I'm very biased, but I was very engaged in the process when we partnered with Discovery, the offshoot of the Discovery Channel, Discovery Education, and they helped us create curricula for nuclear at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school. We also have information on careers, and we're actually expanding that content now, beyond just the high technical, high professional positions, to expand that. So let's stay in touch because that's on the way. I also, actually in preparation for the little speed talks we had 2 days ago with it rotating around the tables, I found some other resources that I can share with you, websites that I just thought were really good. But don't reinvent the wheel is my suggestion. And reach out to American Nuclear Society, reach out to a university that has nuclear. You'd be surprised at how helpful we professors can be.
So again, as I mentioned, as in many for local education, but that's not just all. It's not just all about money. It is all about time. And many of our executive and employees at all of our sites, whether it's Paducah or here in Idaho or at Savannah Riverside, spend an enormous amount of hours working in classrooms at K through 12 levels. We had a very successful program, Highway to Hanford in the Tri-Cities, where we actually had high schoolers helping solve problems out at the Hanford site. And so I think one of the things I think we may need to look at, and I don't know whether we do this or not, and so I'm going to go back and ask the question is how do you track? And how do you track those individual kids and whether or not they actually come out the other end and go into whether it's a nuclear engineering or science or related field, and so we can have a feedback loop on that. But it's for us as contractors, it's not all about money. It's a time commitment that we make in each of the locations where we work.
And I'd just say, we engage because my whole world is effectively workforce development, and I mean, somebody was in elementary school before they were a pipe fitter or a plumber or whatever, and so we engage at all levels in our area through K through 12. The one thing that I notice, and this is the one thing I guess I've certainly challenged myself. I would say anybody who's trying to say, how can we be more involved in this, I would challenge you to, is just making yourself available. And the reason I say that is because I work with a lot of educators in K through 12, and they want that engagement. And it is just a matter of time. A lot of times it's not about money, it's about exposure. When you go in and you go talk to, I went to a STEM elementary and I went and spoke to some third graders. Obviously, we're talking about, these are long lead items, right? When we're talking investing in third graders. But what's amazing is you have those conversations with them to where that they can actually understand what it is that we do, where that big cloud that comes up from the north part of Richland comes from, and why we work on it. But the educators are the one that want us in there. They have a tough enough job to try to teach everything to all these diverse kids. And what helps is when somebody can come in and focus in on something that they just have never experienced.
Just a quick interjection here, and I love that you're saying talking to educators, not just talking to students, because it's if you spend a day in a class with 24 kids, that's 24 kids, right? If you establish relationship with teachers, you're affecting hundreds and hundreds of children for many years to come, and so I encourage everybody who is doing outreach to really reach out to the teachers themselves. They need information, they want information, they're sponges. One of the things that I've been doing for the past 20 years, twice a year, I do a teacher workshop through the American Nuclear Society. They come from all over the country. We just do nuclear basics and give them tangible things to take back to the classroom. I spend a Saturday doing this, and it's 8 hours, most wisely invested of my time. I feel very strongly about empowering teachers.
Just as we're talking about this, it's not just all about the students too. And as I said, we have a lot of volunteer hours from our employees. The employees themselves get so much out of this opportunity to go interact with the kids. We're never short of volunteers to go and spend, and again, this is after hours, this is after working 9, 10, 11 hours on site and then having to go spend a couple of extra hours working with kids in classrooms and educating them on STEM-related fields. So it's mutually beneficial.
The last resource I want to mention, this is a great question, in case anyone in the room isn't aware, the Career Technical Education group from the federal side just changed the career cluster list and added an energy and natural resources career cluster to the list that had never existed before. There are roughly 7 states that did that on their own and have already built curriculum into the K-12 and like K-14 timeframe. That curriculum is already existent and there. So if you're looking for curriculum to embed that you don't want to recreate, start there. And there'll be a lot more added, right, as that career cluster takes off. I think we're at time, so I just want to thank my panelists, thank you all for listening. I love the idea of being chronic educators, a very passionate group here. Thanks everyone for being with us.
Thanks so much, Hope. Thank you to our panelists.